Welcome to the Learning Support video and our fifth segment, which will help us determine how much weight is needed to help someone reach their intended target goal as it relates to a resistance training program. As we explore this topic, please know that there are several ways that we could choose to go about this, and the way we choose to go about it may be different depending on who we're working with and or their skill or fitness level, or even the setting that we're in. However, the way that we'll outline here is by using the gold standard. We call this identifying or determining the 1 repetition maximum, or simply the 1 RM. This value is, in essence, the maximum amount of weight that an individual can lift at one time using correct and proper form. Before we begin overviewing this process, it's important to note that we typically only do a 1 repetition maximum test for core exercises and not assistance exercises. So here's the process. We're going to start by allowing the individual to warm up first. So to start, we'll ask him or her to help us select a weight that they believe is challenging, but one that they could lift between 5 to 10 times. After they've completed up to 10 or 10 full repetitions, we'll allow them an opportunity to take a 1-minute rest. Now, we'll ask them to lift a weight that challenges them, but one they believe they can lift between 3 to 5 times. The way that we'll do this is we'll ask them to add weight onto the existing weight that they've already lifted. Now, depending on the type of exercise, that will change. We'll add between 30 and 40 pounds if it's primarily a lower body exercise. And we'll add anywhere from 10 to 20 pounds if it's primarily an upper body exercise. Just as a rule of thumb, it will be better to add the lower limits of the weight first. After they've completed up to 5 but at least 3 repetitions, we'll then give them an opportunity to rest for a total of 2 minutes. After the 2-minute rest period, we'll then ask the individual to lift additional weight for a total of 2 to 3 repetitions. We'll again add weight using the same stipulations as before. After they've completed at least 2 but up to 3 repetitions, we'll ask them to rest for at least 2 but no more than 4 minutes. Now we're ready to test the 1 repetition maximum. We're going to ask the individual to lift additional weight in hopes of us determining the maximum amount of weight they can possibly lift. We'll add weight utilizing the same criteria that we've used before. Let's say, for example, that we're having someone perform the leg press and they select a weight of 150 pounds. If they've selected a weight of 150 pounds and we know that this is a lower body exercise, after we've had them lift between 5 to 10 repetitions, and after we've given them their 1-minute rest period, we're again going to ask them to do 3 to 5 repetitions. But we're going to do that by adding weight. So because this was a lower body exercise, we are going to add 30 pounds to the amount of weight that we started with. So now we're starting with 180 pounds. After he or she lifts that amount of weight for the 3 to 5 reps, we'll give them a 2-minute rest period. Now we're going to up the ante again, where this time we're going to give them an opportunity to lift the weight for 2 to 3 reps by again adding additional weight. So again, because it's a lower extremity exercise, we're adding 30 pounds, and now we're up to 220 pounds. After they've done the number of reps that are needed here, again, we're giving them 2 to 4 minutes of a rest period, and then after that, we're going to have them to do a 1 repetition maximum. Again, this is decided by adding between 30 and 40 additional pounds. Now, here's where we'll check in with the person that we're working with. We'll see how they feel. Do they feel that they could do 30, or do they want to try 40? A lot of this will again depend on the feedback that you're receiving from those that you're working with. As we mentioned earlier, we should have an understanding of what the individual or individuals we're working with have set as their training goal. Once we understand this, we can utilize their 1 repetition maximum to help us determine the appropriate weight or load that they should be lifting to achieve that goal. The way this works is that we'll take a percentage of their 1 repetition maximum for a given exercise, and a percentage of that 1 repetition maximum helps us to help them reach that designated goal. For example, we used the leg press exercise as an example earlier, and what we determined was that the 1 rep max was 260 pounds. And if we're trying to help this individual develop better muscular endurance, we want them lifting weight that is less than, but no more than 67% of their 1 repetition maximum. So for this particular individual, we want to encourage him or her to lift or train with roughly 170 pounds with the leg press exercise. As we continue working with this individual, and if the goal changes to developing muscular hypertrophy, we need to work our way towards a range of between 67 and 85% of the 1 repetition maximum. So just as a note, and this is important, we only make this type of calculation for core exercises. We'll talk more about assistance exercises momentarily. So now that we have an idea regarding the type of load that needs to be lifted in achieving a certain goal, we should now talk about how many sets and repetitions are needed as well. So again, we're going to rely heavily on one's training status to help them determine these values. Notice the ranges here on the screen. For a novice that is looking to increase his or her muscular endurance, we're asking the individual to complete between 10 to 15 repetitions of a given exercise. So for the example we utilized earlier, we'd be asking the individual to lift 170 pounds 10 times. Now, with resistance training, we usually ask individuals to complete sets, meaning we want them to repeat a given exercise a set number of times. So we could ask the individual who's a novice to complete 3 sets of 10 repetitions with 170 pounds. By assigning this load, we're helping him or her to improve upon or develop muscular endurance. Please feel free to pause the video here to see if you can understand the joint concepts of determining the 1 rep max, the training loads and percentages, with the recommendations for the number of repetitions and sets. We must also use wisdom when helping someone to engage in resistance training. One of the best ways for us to do this is by having an individual take small breaks in between sets. The following are recommendations from the American College of Sports Medicine. When focusing on muscular endurance, we should provide no more than 30 seconds in between sets, between 30 seconds to 1.5 minutes for muscular hypertrophy, and between 2 to 5 minutes for muscular strength and power. Let's take a look at how all of these concepts work together. Let's imagine that we're working with someone and we found out the following information. Let's imagine that we've completed their initial consultation, and their initial consultation was completed, and this particular individual had an athletic physical performed at his or her high school, and it was signed off on by a physician. We also determined this individual's training status. The student happened to be a freshman who wants to run track and field in high school, but he or she has no formal training, so quite easily we could classify him or her as a novice. Let's say that for their training goal, they tell us that they want to develop size. Well, before we can truly develop size or hypertrophy, we need to begin by helping him or her develop muscular endurance. Remember, the training goals we looked at is also a sequence of steps. Let's say also that we speak to this individual and we find out that he or she is available to commit to training for 3 days a week on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So again, we've determined his or her 1 rep max for the leg press, for the bench press, for squats, and power cleans. So let's take a look at the data that we have presented here on the screen. The 1 rep max for the leg press is 260 pounds. The 1 rep max for the bench press is 100 pounds. The 1 rep max for squats is 150 pounds. And the 1 rep max for power cleans is 125 pounds. So again, because our goal is hypertrophy, we're wanting to work at no greater than 67% of the individual's 1 repetition maximum. So we're at the upper limits here, and so this means that for this individual completing these core exercises, we want them to work with or train with 175 pounds for the leg press, 70 pounds for the bench press, 100 pounds for the squats, and 85 pounds for the power clean. Now let's shift gears for a moment. We talked about determining the amount of weight that should be lifted for core exercises, but what about assistance exercises? Well, for assistance exercises, we'll need to begin by recalling the training goal. The training goal again is for muscular endurance, and if we're wanting to work on muscular endurance, we need to select the number of repetitions that allow us to focus on that goal. So if you'll remember, our goal for muscular endurance for a novice is between 10 to 15 repetitions. So for an assistance exercise, we want to select a weight that will challenge us or an individual, but also be one that they could lift comfortably between 10 to 15 times. Again, the number of sets that we're going to select could be anywhere from 1 to 3. So in essence, what we're saying here is that the weight lifted will depend heavily on the comfort level of the individual, but please note that this might require some guesswork to determine what the individual is most comfortable with lifting. So again, as we look at our screen here, we would want to select for this individual who's completing bicep curls a weight that he or she feels comfortable with, but that will also challenge them. So for assistance exercises, if this individual is completing bicep curls, calf raises, lateral raises, and tricep extensions, we're going to use the number 10 for the number of repetitions because that is the lowest point that we need to start with in order to help someone work on muscular endurance. Remember that the number of sets that we can choose is anywhere from 1 to 3. A lot of times that'll depend on the individual that we're working with, whether or not we select 1 set, 2 sets, or 3 sets. Now we don't specifically see a set weight listed here because that will depend on the individual and what they believe they're comfortable with. Well, that ends this segment on training load. I hope it's helped you to feel much more comfortable with designing a resistance training program. Thank you again for watching. The next segment is relatively short, brief and to the point, and in it we'll discuss training progression and variability.